The dust settled on Helena Reynolds's worn boots as she stood before the trading post's crooked shelves, wondering how anyone could find a single thing in this chaos of leather-bound volumes, dime novels, and scattered almanacs that smelled of tobacco and prairie wind. It was 1878 in Mineral Park, Arizona Territory, and she had arrived on the morning stage with nothing but a carpetbag and a letter promising her employment organizing the books at Callahan's trading post, the only establishment for miles that sold anything beyond whiskey and ammunition. She pushed a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and surveyed the disaster before her. Books lay spine up, spine down, stacked horizontally and vertically with no discernible system. Some had fallen behind barrels of flour. Others were wedged between saddles and mining equipment. Mr. Callahan, a portly man with mutton chops that could house small birds, had taken one look at her references from the library in Kansas City and hired her on the spot. "Nobody reads out here anyway," he had said, wheezing slightly. "But the circuit judge complained last month that he could not find the law books, and I lost a sale to a mining engineer looking for a geology text. Figure if you can make sense of it. Might bring in more business from the educated folk." Helena had nodded, though she suspected the population of educated folk in Mineral Park numbered fewer than 20. The town existed primarily to serve the nearby silver mines, and most of its residents were more concerned with striking it rich than with literature. Still, employment was employment and she needed to eat. She rolled up her sleeves, grateful that she had worn her oldest dress, a faded calico that had seen better days. The work would be filthy. She started by clearing a large table near the back window, where natural light streamed through gaps in the wooden slats. Then she began the arduous process of gathering every book in the establishment, creating piles based on rough categories: fiction, reference, technical manuals, religious texts, and what she privately termed nonsense. The morning passed in a blur of dust and discovery. She found a pristine copy of Whitman's Leaves of Grass, wedged behind a pickle barrel, water-stained but readable. There was a surprising collection of Shakespeare, though Hamlet was missing its final pages. Technical manuals on mining, geology, and surveying filled 2 crates. She unearthed penny dreadfuls, agricultural guides, medical texts that made her squeamish, and even a French novel that she quickly determined was rather scandalous. She was balanced precariously on a ladder, reaching for a book wedged between the rafters, when she heard the door creak open. Heavy bootfalls crossed the wooden floor, accompanied by the jingle of spurs. She did not look down, focused on extracting what appeared to be a Bible without bringing down the accumulated dust of several years directly onto her face. "Callahan around." The voice was deep, roughened by wind and sun, with a weariness that seemed to go beyond physical exhaustion. "In the back, checking inventory," Helena called down, finally freeing the book. She descended the ladder carefully, clutching her prize, and turned to find herself face to face with the most striking man she had ever seen. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that filled his dusty canvas jacket. His hair, the color of strong coffee, curled slightly at the collar, and he had not shaved in several days. But it was his eyes that arrested her, a startling gray-blue like storm clouds over the mountains, holding a depth of sadness that made her breath catch. He was perhaps 28 or 30, weathered by outdoor life but undeniably handsome in a rough-hewn way. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, and studied her with equal curiosity. "You are new." "I am. Helena Reynolds. I was hired to organize the books." She gestured at the chaos around them, suddenly self-conscious about the dust coating her dress and likely smudging her face. Did not know there were enough books here to require organizing. His gaze traveled over the piles she had created, and something flickered in those stormy eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition. You are from back east, Kansas City, and you are Isaac Sullivan. Folks call me Sully. He turned the hat in his hands, a nervous gesture that seemed at odds with his imposing presence. I run cattle up in the hills, bring supplies out to the line camps. Callahan usually sets aside salt and coffee for me. I can fetch him, Helena offered, setting down the Bible she still clutched. No need. Isaac's eyes had drifted to the books again, to the careful piles, to a stack of novels she had deemed worth preserving. You read all these? Not all. Many are technical manuals outside my expertise, but I have read widely, yes. It is why Mr. Callahan hired me. I worked in a library before coming west. Something changed in his expression, a softening around the eyes. Must have been a big library, large enough. We had several thousand volumes. This is more modest, but no less important. Everyone deserves access to books, to knowledge and stories. She heard the passion creeping into her voice and tried to rein it in. Men out here often found educated women peculiar at best, threatening at worst. But Isaac did not look threatened. If anything, he appeared hungry, though not for food. You believe that stories matter even out here, especially out here, Helena said firmly. The world is hard enough without beauty and meaning. Books provide both. He was quiet for a long moment, still turning that hat in his calloused hands. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a murmur. Could you organize a scattered soul too, or do you only manage books? The question hung in the air between them, so raw and unexpected that Helena felt her heart contract. She searched his face, seeing past the dust and stubble to the pain beneath. Whatever had scattered Isaac Sullivan's soul, it had cut deep. Before she could formulate a response, Mr. Callahan bustled in from the back room, arms full of burlap sacks. Sully, got your order right here. Salt, coffee, beans, and I threw in some of that tobacco you like. How are the boys up at the North Camp? Isaac's expression shuddered, the vulnerable moment disappearing behind a mask of casual friendliness. Good, Callahan. Working hard. Lost a few head to a mountain lion last week, but we tracked it down. As the two men discussed business, Helena retreated to her sorting, but she found her attention wandering to Isaac. He moved with a horseman's grace, economical and sure. When he smiled at something Callahan said, it did not reach his eyes. And twice, she caught him glancing at her piles of books with something like longing. The transaction concluded, Isaac hoisted the supplies onto his broad shoulder with ease. As he headed for the door, he paused beside her table. Miss Reynolds, do you extend lending privileges? Or are these only for sale? Helena looked up at him, at the careful neutrality of his expression that did not quite hide the hope beneath. I am sure Mr. Callahan and I could arrange something. Did you have an interest in something particular? Isaac's eyes swept over the sorted volumes. His hand, scarred and strong, reached out to hover over the fiction pile before settling on a slim volume she had placed aside earlier. This one, if it is available. She glanced at his choice and felt surprise ripple through her. He had selected David Copperfield, Dickens's sweeping tale of loss and redemption. Not a light read, and not what she would have expected from a rough cattleman. Excellent choice. I had forgotten how affecting Dickens could be until I reread portions today. You are familiar with his work. Used to be, long time ago. Isaac's jaw tightened. Been a while since I had time for reading, or maybe I just forgot how. Well then, this is yours to borrow. I will note it in my records. Helena pulled out a small ledger she had started that morning, writing his name and the title in neat script. No particular deadline. Return it when you finish. What do I owe for borrowing? Nothing. Knowledge should be free. Isaac looked at her then, really looked at her, and Helena felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. That is generous. It is practical. The more people read, the more they value books. The more they value books, the more secure my position here becomes. She smiled, trying to lighten the moment, though her heart had begun beating faster under his scrutiny. He tucked the book carefully into his jacket, protecting it from the elements. I will take care of it. Return it in good condition. I trust you will. Isaac settled his hat back on his head, tipping it slightly in farewell. Miss Reynolds, thank you. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving only the scent of leather and sage. Helena stood motionless for several heartbeats, trying to understand what had just transpired. The encounter had felt significant in a way she could not quite articulate, as though invisible threads had been spun between them in the space of a few minutes. That is Sully, Mr. Callahan said unnecessarily, startling her from her reverie. Good man. Tragic story. Helena wanted to ask, curiosity burning through her, but it felt like a violation. If Isaac's story was tragic, he would share it in his own time, or not at all. She simply nodded and returned to her work, though her thoughts remained on stormy eyes and scattered souls. The days that followed established a rhythm. Helena arrived at the trading post each morning as the sun painted the mountains gold and pink. She worked methodically through the collection, creating a cataloging system that made sense for the space and clientele. Fiction was separated by author when possible, though many volumes lacked clear attribution. Reference books were grouped by subject. She convinced Mr. Callahan to invest in simple wooden bookends and labels, arguing that the professional appearance would attract more business. She was right. Word spread through Mineral Park that the trading post now had an actual library of sorts, overseen by a proper librarian from Kansas City. Miners stopped in to browse technical manuals. The school teacher, a severe woman named Mrs. Pritchard, came to select books for her students. Even the saloon owner, a surprisingly well-read man called Dutch, borrowed a collection of Poe stories. But Isaac did not return. Helena told herself it did not matter. He was busy with his cattle, riding the range, doing whatever cowboys did. The book had been a momentary impulse, perhaps, or he had started reading and found it not to his taste. She had no claim on his time or attention. Their brief exchange had been nothing more than a pleasant interaction between strangers. Yet she found herself watching the door whenever she heard horses outside. Her heart would lift, then sink when the visitor proved to be someone else. She scolded herself for being foolish. She was 23 years old, well past the age of girlish infatuation, and far too sensible to build fantasies around a man she had met for all of 10 minutes. 2 weeks after their first encounter, Helena was helping a customer when she heard a familiar jingle of spurs. She looked up from the geology text she was describing to find Isaac standing in the doorway, hat in hand, the Dickens novel tucked under his arm. Her heart performed an acrobatic feat in her chest, and she had to remind herself to breathe. Mr. Sullivan, welcome back. He nodded to her, waiting patiently while she completed her transaction with the mining engineer. The customer finally departed with his purchase, leaving them alone in the afternoon quiet. Mr. Callahan had gone home for lunch, as was his habit, leaving Helena to mind the store. Isaac approached the counter, laying the book down gently. Finished it. You were right about it being affecting. Helena picked up the volume, noting that he had indeed taken excellent care of it. Not a bent page, no additional stains beyond those that had existed when he borrowed it. Did you enjoy it? Enjoy is not the right word. It gutted me. then put me back together slightly different than I was before. Is that not what the best books do?" His eloquence surprised her again, though she was beginning to realize that Isaac Sullivan contained depths not immediately apparent. "Yes, exactly that. Did you have a favorite passage?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "The part where David realizes that despite everything that happened, all the losses and betrayals, he is still capable of loving. That despair is not the end of the story." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Helena searched his face, seeing the vulnerability he was offering her, recognizing it as a kind of trust. "You identify with David. Maybe, or maybe I just need to believe what Dickens believed, that scattered things can be gathered up again. That broken things can mend." He met her eyes, and she saw the question there, the uncertainty. "Do you have another recommendation? Something that continues that theme?" "I do." Helena moved to her carefully organized shelves, running her fingers along the spines until she found what she sought. "Try this. Jane Eyre. Another story of loss and redemption, but with a heroine who refuses to compromise herself despite immense pressure. Charlotte Brontë wrote it with such fire." Isaac took the book carefully, examining the cover. "Never read a book written by a woman before. At least, not that I remember." "Then you have been missing half of literature's best voices," Helena said with a smile. "Women have been writing extraordinary works for centuries, even if the world has not always acknowledged it. I believe you." He tucked the book into his jacket. "Miss Reynolds, may I ask you something forward?" "You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer." A hint of a smile touched his lips, the first real one she had seen. It transformed his face, chasing away some of the sorrow. "Would you consider joining me for supper sometime? There is a decent restaurant next to the hotel. Nothing fancy, but the food is good, and I would value the conversation of someone who reads." Helena's first instinct was to say yes immediately, but caution held her tongue. She knew nothing about this man beyond his name and his taste in literature. Yet something in her recognized something in him, a kinship that transcended the usual social calculations. "I would like that," she said carefully. "But I should warn you, Mr. Sullivan, I am not accomplished at feminine wiles or flirtation. I tend to speak my mind, which men often find off-putting." "Good," Isaac said firmly. "I have had enough of artifice to last a lifetime. Plain speaking would be a gift." "Then yes, I accept your invitation. Tonight, around 7, tonight would be fine." After he left, Helena pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, wondering what she had agreed to. A supper, nothing more, she told herself. Conversation with someone who appreciated books. It did not have to mean anything beyond that. But when 7 o'clock approached and she had changed into her best dress, a deep blue cotton with ivory buttons, she knew she was lying to herself. Something was happening here, something that felt inevitable and frightening in equal measure. Isaac was waiting outside the restaurant, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt under his jacket. He had made an effort, and the realization touched her. He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric. The restaurant was indeed simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat. They ordered beef stew and cornbread, and when the food arrived, Helena realized she was too nervous to eat much. Isaac seemed similarly affected, pushing his stew around with his spoon. "I am terrible at this," he finally said with a rueful shake of his head. "Not been out to supper with a woman in years. Not sure I remember how to make pleasant conversation." "Then let us dispense with pleasant and aim for honest," Helena suggested. "Why did you really want to have supper with me?" Isaac set down his spoon, meeting her eyes. "Because you saw me when I asked that fool question about organizing souls, and you did not laugh or treat it as a jest. You heard what I was really asking." "What were you really asking?" If I could be fixed, if whatever broke inside me could be made whole again. He looked down at his hands, at the scars and calluses. I know that is too heavy for a first supper conversation, but you said you wanted honest. I did, and I do. Helena leaned forward. What broke you, Isaac? He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. I was married. Her name was Margaret. We had a son, Thomas, 3 years old, bright as a new penny. We lived in Texas, had a small ranch, nothing grand, but it was ours. 5 years ago, there was a fever, swept through faster than wildfire. I was out on a cattle drive 3 weeks away by the time I got back. He stopped, swallowing hard. By the time I got back, they were both gone, buried in the churchyard. Helena felt tears prick her eyes. Oh, Isaac, I am so sorry. I sold everything, could not bear to stay. Worked my way west, hired on with different outfits, kept moving. Ended up here about 2 years ago, been running cattle for the big ranches. Saving money for I am not sure what. I just keep working because I do not know what else to do. He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. That day I came into the trading post, I was not even looking for books. But I saw you standing there, organizing all that chaos into something that made sense, and I thought maybe if you could do that with books, there was hope for the rest of us scattered things too. Helena reached across the table and took his hand, not caring what anyone might think. You are not a thing to be organized, Isaac. You are a man who suffered an unbearable loss, but you are still here. You are still reading and working and living. That takes tremendous courage. Does not feel like courage, feels like I am just going through motions. Sometimes that is what courage looks like, one foot in front of the other even when every step hurts. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for telling me. That took trust and I will honor it. They talked for hours after that, the conversation flowing more easily as the initial heavy disclosure lifted. Isaac told her about his life on the range, the beauty of dawn in the high country, the satisfaction of honest work. Helena shared her own story of leaving Kansas City after her father died, of needing a fresh start somewhere that did not hold memories on every corner. So we are both running, Isaac observed. Perhaps. Or perhaps we are both seeking. Running implies fleeing in panic. Seeking suggests we are looking for something specific. What are you seeking, Helena? She considered the question carefully. Purpose, I think. A place where I matter. Where the work I do makes a difference, even if it is a small one. What about you? I do not know anymore. I used to think I sought peace, but I am starting to wonder if what I really need is permission to live again. To want things, feel things without guilt. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. You make me want to try, at least. That is new. The weight of his words settled over them, pregnant with possibility and risk. Helena knew she should be cautious, should protect her heart, but looking into Isaac's storm-cloud eyes, she found she did not want to be cautious. She wanted to be brave. Then try, she said softly. And I will try too. We can fumble through it together. Isaac smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, and Helena felt something in her chest crack open, letting in light. They walked back through Mineral Park's dusty streets under a ceiling of stars so bright it seemed impossible. Isaac insisted on escorting her to the boarding house where she rented a room, and at the door they stood awkwardly, neither quite ready to part. May I call on you again? Isaac asked. Properly, I mean, not just to borrow books, though I will do that too. I would like that very much. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and utterly sincere, and it made her heart race. Good night, Helena. Good night, Isaac. She climbed the stairs to her room in a daze, pressing her hand to her chest as though she could slow her galloping heart. Behind her closed door, she allowed herself a smile that felt too big for her face. Something was beginning, something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Helena had experienced in Kansas City, where young men had called on her with formal stiffness. Their attention divided between her and the promise of her father's comfortable income. After his death, when the income disappeared into the settling of debts, so had the suitors. But Isaac courted her with an intensity that left her breathless. He came to the trading post whenever his work allowed, timing his visits for the slower afternoon hours when they could talk. He read every book she recommended, and they debated themes and characters with a passion that bewildered Mr. Callahan. "Never seen a courtship conducted through literature before," the trader commented one day after Isaac had left. "But if it makes you both happy, who am I to judge?" Helena blushed, but did not deny it was a courtship. How could she when Isaac had made his intentions clear? 3 weeks after their first supper, he took her riding into the foothills. She borrowed a gentle mare from the livery, and they spent a golden afternoon exploring the landscape. Isaac showed her hidden valleys where wildflowers bloomed in defiance of the harsh climate, and springs where the water ran cold and clear. He pointed out the tracks of deer and coyote, teaching her to read the desert's subtle stories. They dismounted near an outcropping of red rock that provided shade from the late afternoon sun. Isaac spread a blanket and unpacked the simple meal he had brought: bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of water. "Tell me something you have never told anyone else," Helena said as they ate, enjoying the playful intimacy that had developed between them. Isaac considered, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of apple. "I used to write poetry, before Margaret, before Texas. When I was young and stupid and thought words could capture the world. That is not stupid at all. Do you remember any of it? Some mostly terrible verse about mountains and freedom and other clichés young men fixate on. Recite something," Helena urged. "Please." He shook his head, embarrassed. "It has been over a decade. Even so, I have shared my deepest secret with you." This was true. A week earlier, she had confessed her fear that she would never truly belong anywhere, that she was doomed to be a permanent outsider watching life from behind library shelves. That was profound existential dread. "My bad poetry hardly compares. Let me be the judge of quality. Please, Isaac." He sighed but complied, his voice hesitant at first, then growing stronger. "The mountains hold their silence like a prayer, each peak a supplicant to empty air. Below, the restless rivers carve their way, seeking seas they will not reach today. And I, caught between stone and stream, wonder which path follows the true dream." Silence fell when he finished. Helena sat very still, moved beyond words. The poem was raw and unpolished, yes, but it held a truth that could not be denied. "See, terrible," Isaac said, misreading her silence. "No," Helena said fiercely. "No, it is beautiful, sad but beautiful. You should write again." "I would not know what to write about. Write about now, about this." She gestured to the vast landscape around them, to the two of them sitting together in the shade. "Write about second chances." Isaac looked at her with such tenderness that she felt herself leaning toward him without conscious thought. He cupped her face with one calloused hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she whispered. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, as though he were handling something precious that might break. Helena sighed into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, and she tasted apples and possibility. When they finally drew apart, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I did not think I would feel this again. Did not think I deserved to." "You deserve every happiness, Isaac Sullivan." I am not sure that is true, but I am grateful you believe it." They stayed on the hillside until the sun began to set, talking about everything and nothing, stealing kisses that grew less tentative and more sure. When they finally rode back to town, Helena felt transformed, as though she had left one version of herself on that red rock and picked up another, braver one. But not everyone was pleased with the developing romance. Mrs. Pritchard, the schoolteacher, cornered Helena at the general store one morning with a pinched expression. "Miss Reynolds, I feel it is my duty to warn you about Isaac Sullivan." Helena stiffened, her arms full of the supplies she was purchasing. "Warn me about what exactly?" "He is a drifter, a man with a past. I understand he was married before, that there was tragedy. Such men carry darkness with them. You are young and naive. I would hate to see you make a mistake that could ruin your reputation." "My reputation is my concern, Mrs. Pritchard. And Isaac is the finest man I have met. You barely know him." "I know enough. I know he is honest and kind and treats me with respect. That is more than many women can say of their suitors." Mrs. Pritchard sniffed disapprovingly. "I am merely trying to help. This is a small town. People talk." "Then let them talk. I am not living my life for the comfort of gossips." Helena paid for her purchases and left, trembling with anger but also with certainty. She had found something real with Isaac, something worth defending against small-minded judgment. That evening, Isaac came to the trading post just as she was closing up. He took one look at her face and frowned. "What happened?" She told him about the encounter, watching his expression darken. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I should have considered how courting you might affect your standing in town. Mrs. Pritchard is not wrong that I come with complications." "You want to stop seeing me?" "No," he said vehemently. "But I want you to have a choice. I want you to know what you are choosing." "I am choosing you," Helena said firmly. "And I am choosing myself, the self I want to be, the woman who takes risks for what matters. Does that frighten you?" Isaac pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. "It terrifies me. What if I fail you? What if I cannot be what you need?" "What if you can? What if we both can?" She pulled back enough to see his face. "I am not asking for perfection, Isaac. I am asking for honesty and effort and the willingness to try. Can you give me that?" "Yes. God, yes, I can give you that." He kissed her then, deep and urgent, and she responded with equal fervor, pouring all her certainty and hope into the embrace. The summer deepened, bringing with it intense heat and occasional thunderstorms that turned the dry washes into rushing torrents. Helena's library continued to flourish, and she began to feel genuinely rooted in Mineral Park. She made friends with the hotel owner's wife, a practical woman named Rose who did not care about Helena's attachment to a cowboy with a tragic past. Isaac managed to arrange his work schedule to spend more time in town. He took a room at the hotel rather than staying at the distant line camps, explaining to his boss that he needed to be closer to civilization. Everyone knew it was because of Helena, and she no longer cared what anyone thought. They spent their free time together, exploring the landscape, talking endlessly, reading aloud to each other from the books she curated. Isaac did begin writing again, showing her tentative new poems that grew stronger and more assured with each attempt. She was witness to his gradual healing, to the way joy crept back into his expressions, and felt honored to be part of that journey. 4 months after their first meeting, Isaac took her back to the red rock outcropping where they had first kissed. It was early evening, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple, the heat of the day giving way to blessed coolness. They sat on the same blanket, watching the light change, comfortable in the silence that had become familiar. Finally, Isaac took her hand. "Helena, I need to tell you something." Her heart clenched. His tone was serious, and for a moment she feared he was ending things. But when she looked at his face, she saw nervousness, not regret. "I am listening. When Margaret and Thomas died, I thought my life was over. Not in the sense that I wanted to die, though there were dark moments when that seemed appealing. But I thought the part of me that could build a life, make plans, hope for things, that part was dead and buried with them. I was just a ghost walking around, going through motions." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Helena squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. "Then I met you, standing in that chaos of books, and something stirred, something I thought was gone forever. You made me remember that I used to be someone who read poetry and thought about ideas and believed the world held beauty. You made me want to be that person again. Isaac, let me finish, please. I am not good at this." He smiled shakily. "What I am trying to say is that you did not fix me. I am still scattered in some ways, still carry scars. But you made me believe I could gather up those scattered pieces and build something new. Not a replacement for what I lost, because that is impossible. But a new life, a different life, one that honors my past but does not remain trapped in it." He shifted, reaching into his pocket. When he pulled out a simple gold band, Helena gasped. "This was my mother's ring. It is the only thing of value I own. Helena Reynolds, would you marry me? Would you take a chance on a broken-down cowboy who loves you more than he thought possible to love anything again?" Tears streamed down Helena's face, but she was smiling. "You are not broken down. You are healing. And yes, yes, I will marry you." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and the desert sunset painted them both in gold. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church at the edge of Mineral Park. Helena wore a simple white dress that Rose had helped her sew, and Isaac wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous in equal measure. Mr. Callahan gave Helena away, having become something of a father figure to her. Rose served as matron of honor, and several of Isaac's cowboy friends stood up with him. Even Mrs. Pritchard attended, though she maintained a disapproving expression throughout. Helena decided to consider her presence a victory of sorts. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The celebration afterward was held in the hotel dining room with food and music and dancing that lasted into the night. "Happy," Isaac murmured as they swayed together to a fiddle tune. "Deliriously," Helena confirmed. "You, more than I thought possible. You have given me a gift, Helena. A future." "We have given each other that gift," she corrected. They spent their wedding night in the hotel's best room, which Rose had decorated with wildflowers. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a joining that felt like a promise being kept. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Helena traced the scars on Isaac's chest from years of hard work. "Tell me what you are thinking," she said softly. "That I am grateful. That I did not believe this happiness existed anymore. That I will spend every day trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me, just as I deserve you. We found each other, Isaac. Against all odds in this harsh landscape, we found each other. That is not something to question. It is something to celebrate." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I wrote you a poem, for today. Want to hear it, always." His voice was low in the darkness, intimate and sure. "You found me in the wreckage of my days, when I had forgotten hope, forgotten praise. You did not heal me with a magic touch, but taught me broken things can still mean much. You organized the books, then showed me how to organize the pieces of my now, not into what they were, but what could be, a future built from scattered history. I was the cowboy with a shattered soul. You made me understand I could be whole. not by erasing pain or loss or scar, but by accepting fully who we are. Helena was crying again, moved beyond words. That is beautiful. You are beautiful. I love you, Helena Sullivan. I love you too. Mr. Callahan had agreed to let Helena continue working at the trading post after the marriage, an arrangement that suited them both. Isaac had saved enough money over the years to lease a small ranch about 5 miles from town. It was modest, just a cabin and some grazing land, but it was theirs. They spent the fall fixing up the property, turning the drafty cabin into a real home. Helena insisted on building floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in the main room, and Isaac constructed them with care. They began accumulating their own library, purchasing volumes from the trading post and ordering others from back east. On cold evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading aloud to each other or writing. Isaac continued composing poetry, and Helena began keeping a journal, documenting their life together with care and attention. They were building something together, brick by brick, day by day. The first winter was hard, as winters in the Arizona Territory often were. Snow fell in the high country, and temperatures dropped low enough to freeze water in the morning. But the cabin was snug, and they kept each other warm. Isaac worked when weather permitted, and when it did not, he stayed home, helping Helena with the 100 small tasks of maintaining a household. It was during one of those snowbound January days that Helena realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before saying anything. That morning, the nausea that had plagued her confirmed what she already knew. She waited until evening, until they were curled together by the fire, to tell him. "Isaac, I have news." He looked up from the book he was reading, marking his place with a finger. "Good news or bad news? Good news. At least, I hope you will think it is good news. I am expecting a baby." For a moment, Isaac went completely still. His face drained of color, and Helena felt a spike of fear. She had not considered that a child might be too much, might bring back memories of Thomas that were too painful to bear. "Isaac," she said uncertainly, "talk to me." He set the book aside with shaking hands. "I am terrified," he whispered. "What if something happens? What if I lose you, lose the baby? I cannot survive that again, Helena. I cannot." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. We cannot live our lives in fear of loss. Yes, something could happen. Life is uncertain and sometimes cruel, but we could also have a healthy, beautiful child. We could build a family. Do not let fear steal this joy from us. I do not know how to not be afraid. Then be afraid. But be hopeful too. Be present. Be here with me now in this moment when we have just learned we are going to be parents. Let yourself feel that, Isaac." She watched him struggle, saw the war between terror and hope play out across his features. Then slowly he placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly, "our baby." "Yes." A smile began to break through the fear. "A baby. Helena, we are going to have a baby. We are." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am still terrified. But I am also happy. Is it possible to be both?" "I think it is the definition of parenthood," Helena said with a laugh. "Perpetual terror mixed with overwhelming love." The pregnancy progressed well through the winter and into spring. Helena continued working at the trading post, though Mr. Callahan insisted she reduce her hours and avoid heavy lifting. Isaac was attentive to the point of being overprotective, until Helena finally had to tell him she was pregnant, not made of glass. "I know," he said sheepishly. "But you are carrying something more precious than all the gold in Arizona. Let me fuss." "A little fussing is acceptable, but I need to maintain some independence." They compromised, as they had learned to do over the months of marriage. Isaac channeled his nervous energy into preparing for the baby. He built a cradle with meticulous care, sanding it until the wood was smooth as silk. Helena sewed blankets and tiny clothes, marveling at how small a new human actually was. Rose threw a party for Helena in late May, inviting all the women in town. Even Mrs. Pritchard attended, bringing a beautifully knitted blanket as a gift. She approached Helena with something approximating warmth. "I was wrong about Isaac Sullivan," she said stiffly. "He has proven to be a devoted husband. I hope you will accept my apology for my earlier comments." Helena was surprised but gracious. "Thank you, Mrs. Pritchard. That means a great deal. And I hope you will return to organizing books after the baby comes. My students have benefited greatly from having access to your library." It was as close to a blessing as Helena was likely to receive from the stern schoolteacher, and she accepted it with good grace. The baby came in early July, during a hot spell that made the cabin feel like an oven. Helena's labor was long but not overly difficult, attended by Rose and the town's midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen. Isaac paced outside, prevented from entering by tradition and his own squeamishness. When the baby's first cry pierced the air, he burst through the door despite Rose's protests. Helena lay exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny, red-faced infant. "It is a boy," Rose announced. "And both mother and child are healthy." Isaac approached the bed slowly as though in a dream. Helena held out their son, and he took the baby with extreme care, cradling him against his chest. Tears ran freely down his face. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered. "Look at him, Helena. He is perfect." "What should we name him?" Helena asked, though she had a suggestion ready. Isaac looked down at the baby, then at her. "I would like to name him Thomas after my son, if that is acceptable to you, not to replace him but to honor his memory." Helena felt her own tears fall. "Thomas is a beautiful name. Thomas Sullivan." "Thomas Sullivan," Isaac repeated, testing it out. The baby yawned, unimpressed with the gravity of the moment, and both parents laughed through their tears. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and alert, with Isaac's gray-blue eyes and Helena's auburn hair. They took turns walking him when he was fussy, sang him lullabies, and read to him from the books lining their shelves, even though he was far too young to understand. Helena took a few months away from the trading post, but by Thomas's first birthday, she had worked out an arrangement where she worked mornings while Rose watched the baby. Isaac adjusted his ranching work to be home in the afternoons, and they made it function. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier but deeply satisfying. They were building something together, not just a family but a life rich with meaning. Isaac's poetry grew stronger, and he began submitting pieces to newspapers back east. Several were published, bringing in a little extra income and a great deal of pride. Helena expanded her library work, starting a reading circle for women in town. They met twice monthly to discuss books, and the gatherings became a highlight for many isolated ranch wives who craved intellectual stimulation. Even Mrs. Pritchard joined, revealing a surprisingly sharp wit when discussing literature. When Thomas was 2, Helena became pregnant again. This time, Isaac was still nervous but less panicked. He had learned that worry did not prevent tragedy, and joy was not something to be rationed out of fear. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, a tiny, fierce creature with a powerful set of lungs. They named her Margaret Rose, after Isaac's first wife and their friend Rose. It was Helena's idea, wanting to honor the woman who had been part of Isaac's life, acknowledging that loving her did not diminish his love for Helena. "Are you sure?" Isaac asked when she suggested it. "I do not want you to feel like you are competing with a ghost." "I am not competing. I am honoring. Margaret was real, Isaac. She was part of your life, part of what shaped you into the man I love. Our daughter should carry her name proudly. So Margaret Rose Sullivan entered the world, and if Isaac wept when he held her for the first time, no one commented. He was a man who had learned to feel deeply, to embrace both joy and sorrow, and there was no shame in that. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. Thomas grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books as much as his parents, often found with his nose in a volume beyond his years. Margaret, whom they called Maggie, was adventurous and bold, always climbing trees and exploring the landscape, despite her mother's worried calls. Isaac expanded the ranch gradually, buying more land, increasing their herd. He became known in the region as a fair man to work for, someone who treated his hands with respect. Helena's library grew as well, until Mr. Callahan finally admitted it was the most profitable part of his trading post. "Should have hired you years ago," he said. "Turns out even cowboys and miners appreciate a good book." When Thomas was 8 and Maggie 6, they had another child, a boy they named Henry after Helena's father. By then, they had expanded the cabin into a proper house, with enough bedrooms for their growing family and a dedicated library that was Helena's pride and joy. But it was not all easy. The Arizona territory could be harsh, with droughts that decimated herds and flash floods that destroyed carefully tended land. There were illnesses, injuries, setbacks that tested their resolve. But they faced each challenge together, drawing strength from their partnership. One evening, when the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple, Isaac took Helena's hand. "You remember that first day when I asked if you could organize my scattered soul?" "I remember everything about that day," Helena said. "I have been thinking about it, about how broken I felt, how certain I was that the best part of my life was behind me." He turned to her, his face serious. "You did not fix me, Helena, but you showed me I did not need fixing. You showed me that brokenness and wholeness can exist together, that loss does not negate love, that endings can also be beginnings. You taught me those same lessons," Helena said softly. "I was so afraid of never belonging, of always being on the outside. You showed me that home is not a place. It is people. It is this." She gestured to the house behind them, full of sleeping children and books and the accumulated treasures of their life together. "I love you," Isaac said. "More than I did 10 years ago, which I did not think was possible." "Love grows," Helena said. "That is what we have learned. It does not diminish with use or time. It expands, encompassing more and more." He kissed her then, sweet and familiar, the kiss of long partnership rather than new passion, though passion still flared between them in private moments. It was the kiss of two people who had chosen each other every day for a decade and would continue choosing each other for however many years they were granted. The children grew, as children do. Thomas became a teacher, opening a school that combined his love of learning with his gentle nature. Maggie, defying expectations, became a surveyor, tramping through the wilderness, mapping the expanding territory. Henry showed an early aptitude for ranching and worked alongside his father, eventually taking over more of the operation as Isaac's hair silvered and his joints stiffened. Isaac never stopped writing poetry. His work appeared in magazines and newspapers across the country, small publications that did not pay much but brought him satisfaction. Helena continued her library work well into her 60s, finally training a young woman to take over when her eyesight began to fail. They became fixtures in Mineral Park, the couple who had built a life from scattered pieces, who proved that second chances were real. Young people came to them for advice, drawn by their obvious devotion and the warmth of their home. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The house was full of friends and family, grandchildren running underfoot. Thomas stood to give a toast, his voice carrying across the crowded room. My parents have taught me many things, but the most important is this, that love is not a bolt of lightning that strikes once and then is done. Love is a choice, made fresh each day. It is work and effort and grace. It is showing up, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. They have shown us what it means to build a life together, and we are all blessed for it. There was not a dry eye in the house when he finished. Helena looked at Isaac, saw the tears streaming down his weathered face, and felt her own heart overflow. This life, this beautiful, imperfect, joyful life, was more than she had ever dreamed possible that dusty day, when a sad-eyed cowboy had asked if she could organize his scattered soul. "Did I do a good job?" she whispered to Isaac as the party continued around them. "Organizing your soul," he pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "You did not organize it, love. You helped me understand it did not need organizing. It just needed permission to be scattered sometimes, to hold multiple truths at once, to carry grief and joy together. You gave me that permission. You gave me everything. And you gave me a home," Helena said. "Not just a place, but a sense of belonging I had never known. You organized my scattered heart. Then we are even." "No," Helena said with a smile, "we are blessed." The party continued late into the night, full of laughter and music and stories. When everyone finally left and the house was quiet again, Isaac and Helena sat together in the library, surrounded by the books that had brought them together. "Read to me," Helena requested, settling against his shoulder. Isaac pulled down a worn volume, the Dickens that had been his first borrowing all those years ago. He opened it to a favorite passage and began to read, his voice still strong despite the years. Helena closed her eyes, listening to the words she had heard 100 times and felt perfectly content. Outside, the desert night wrapped around their home, full of stars and silence. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds sat together, proof that broken things could mend, that scattered souls could find peace, and that love, when tended with care, could bloom even in the harshest landscape. They lived many more years together, never wealthy but always rich in the things that mattered. When Isaac finally passed at 78, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, his last words were of poetry and Helena. She followed him 3 years later, her final moments spent in the library she had built, a book open in her lap. Their children found her there, peaceful and smiling, and when they looked at the book, they saw it was the Dickens, open to the passage about David learning to love again after loss. A slip of paper marked the page, and on it, in Isaac's careful handwriting, was the poem he had recited on their wedding night. They buried Helena and Isaac side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Here lie Helena and Isaac Sullivan." She organized books. He wrote poetry. Together, they built a life. 1855–1933 and 1848–1931. But their real legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the library that bore Helena's name, in the collections of Isaac's poetry that were published after his death. Most of all, it lived in the story that became part of Mineral Park's history, of the librarian and the cowboy who proved that even the most scattered souls could find their way home, if they were brave enough to reach for each other across the chaos. The trading post where they met still stands, now a historical landmark. The books Helena organized so carefully were eventually donated to the town library, and people still come to see them, to trace the careful handwriting of her cataloging system. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, visitors report feeling a sense of peace in that space, as though some echo of Helena's patience and Isaac's healing still lingers among the shelves. And perhaps it does. Love like theirs does not simply end. It transforms, becoming part of the landscape, woven into the stories we tell ourselves about what is possible. Helena and Isaac's story reminds us that scattered things can be gathered, broken things can mend, and two lonely people can find in each other everything they need to build a life worth living. In the end, that is what they did. They took their scattered souls, their grief and hope and fear and courage, and organized it all into something beautiful. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and true and theirs. And in doing so, they left behind more than children or land or words on a page. They left behind proof that love is the greatest organizing principle of all, capable of making sense of even the most chaotic heart. Their story ends where it began, in a dusty trading post in Mineral Park, Arizona Territory, where books still line the shelves and where, if you listen carefully, you might still hear the echo of a cowboy asking if a scattered soul can be organized, and a woman answering yes, yes it can, if you are brave enough to try.